Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And summarizing everything before we start the video, I would like to tell you that most likely we are becoming witnesses of something big, something huge, and most of all something terrible. First of all, for the armed forces of Ukraine, then for Syrsky, then for Zelensky, and then for Ukraine itself. And one can say that Ukrainians are about to be completely defeated on the line between the villages of Velyka Novosilka and the city of Kursk, because during the previous 24 hours, during the previous 72 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, and the same dynamic we used to see probably in 2022 when the Russians just entered the territory of Ukraine. So let's discuss in details, and first let's talk about the Velyka Novosilka direction, where the Russians managed to improve their positions. At least we got these reports from pro-Ukrainian mappers. The deep state reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to maintain the line and to improve their positions to the south of the village by the name of Novodarivka. So the Russians are preparing for something, and most likely, as we discussed in the previous videos, most likely the Russians are planning to attack in the direction of Velyka Novosilka from the west, with the purpose to cut the settlement and to encircle the Ukrainians who are currently located there. So this is a basic Russian outflanking maneuver. Now let's talk about the South Donetsk direction. As you can see, we have the significant number of icons, and most of them have the flag, which means additional progress on the ground, and according to the color, the additional progress on the ground, of course, in Russian favor. So let's begin from Zolotaya Niva. According to neutral mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their positions in the western direction and to get closer to the village of Velyka Novosilka from the southeast. This is not like offensive operation, it's just the improvements of position and preparation before further advance. But when exactly this advance are going to happen, maybe in a day, maybe in a two, maybe when the Russians finish with the villages like Shakhtarska, Yasnaya Polyana, Novoukrainka, and Bogoyavlenka. Now let's talk about these three villages, and as you can see, we have a lot of changes on the ground. Some of them were confirmed by videos and geolocations. Some of them were provided just by different mappers and reliable resources. So let's discuss in details. But before we start, I would like to point your attention that the Russians during the previous 72 hours managed to enter every single settlement. The Russians entered the southeastern part of Shakhtarska, the southwestern part of Novoukrainka, and as you can see, the Russians managed to take under control Bogoyavlenka completely. We haven't adjusted the map, let's say for 100% of Bogoyavlenka. We just adjusted the map according to geolocations, but we have no doubts that the village has fallen and the Russians captured it. Now let's discuss in details. First, we're going to talk about Shakhtarska. Today, the pro-Ukrainian sources published this map, and as you can see in this map, we can see three roads of attacks in the direction of each settlement, and every single road confirms that the Russians managed to advance, to break through the Ukraine defense belt, and to capture some part of every single settlement: Shakhtarska, Novoukrainka, and Bogoyavlenka. As for the geolocations, today the Ukrainian sources published the video of those Russian attacks. You can see the significant number of armored vehicles and personal carriers. Just take a look at this video from the beginning once again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the convoy goes beyond the horizon. So we can't even calculate the exact number of personal carriers and tanks that the Russians were using. I believe that when Ukrainians saw this attack, first of all they were shocked, and after that they began doing something. But obviously the forces they had in this direction weren't enough to slow down, not even to stop, but not even to slow down the Russians. And as a result of these attacks that we can see right now in front of our screens, the Russians managed to break through the Ukraine defense belt and to answer the village of Shakhtarska itself. Currently, there are very heavy clashes on the territory of the settlement, and telling the truth, as for the pro-Russian resources, a lot of pro-Russian military experts and those who have some connections with the soldiers on the ground have already reported that every single village, like Shakhtarska, Novoukrainka, Bogoyavlenka, have already fallen, and the Russians managed to capture every single one. But we're waiting for additional updates. But telling the truth, breakthroughs. I believe that during the next update that is going to take place in the morning of the 28th of October, most likely we will color every single village in Russian favor, at least based on the different reliable resources or neutral mappers or pro-Ukrainian mappers. Now let's talk about Novoukrainka. We also have additional changes on the ground according to different mappers. As you can see, there is a very big, huge area in the contested zone. We have some changes on the ground that were confirmed, but lots of updates haven't been confirmed yet, including report that the Russians entered the southwestern part of the village and they answered the farms. This, by the way, this information was provided by pro-Ukrainians. As for this direction, the Russians were attacking along the line between Prichistovka and Novoukrainka itself. The Russians were attacking from the village of Zolotaya Niva using this direction, using this road. They managed to, as you can see, bypass the significant number of territories and to enter the village itself. Once again, some pro-Russian sources reported that the village have already fallen, and it's like already the story. It's not like even the reality, the thing that you can see right now in front of your screens. And of course, the village of Bogoyavlenka. Just this morning, we got reports from different mappers that the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the settlement, and the territory that you can see right now in front of your screen, this one, red one, that's like additional Russian gains. All these territories in the morning, let's say 10 hours ago, was colored in contested area because we didn't have any geolocations that can confirm this. But somewhere during the day, somewhere at probably at 5, maybe at 6 p.m. of the local Ukrainian time, we got the video with the Russian flag in the most northern part, not even the most northern part, but in the southern part of the most northern part of the settlement. In this video, we can see two Russian flags that were raised on the building. As you can see, the building was already almost reduced to ruins. As you can see, the Bogoyavlenka was taken by the 29th Army, the 336th separate mechanized motorized brigade. Two flags. This is enough of evidence to confirm the settlement was captured by the Russians. We see that the Russians feel them very secured, very free, without any problems, without any risk or being afraid of any attack from the Ukrainian side, which confirms, first of all, strong control over the territory. Not just that the Russians managed to capture, but this is real strong control. Because sometimes we saw videos where we can see the flags without Russian soldiers, which means that if there is just a flag but without Russians, that means that the Russians don't have strong control. But as for this case, no problems from the Russian side to make this video. And based on this video, we have adjusted the map, of course, in Russian favor. And also later, we got update from pro-Ukrainian sources that the Russians captured not just the south and the central part, but also the Russians established control over the farms. Once again, I believe that tomorrow, during the next 12-14 hours, this entire territory would be colored in Russian favor. Because we see that Ukrainians don't show any resistance and something wrong. Something is happening with the armed forces of Ukraine. Anyway, sooner or later, we're going to understand this, which brigades decided to surrender or which brigade left their positions or something like this, because obviously we're going to see these excuses from the Ukrainian side. So let's discuss now in details how exactly the Russian offensive operation was developing since the 25th of October, because right now, right in front of your screen, you can see the situation at the beginning of the 25th of October. So 2 days ago. 2 days ago, the village of Shakhtarska, Novoukrainka, and Bogoyavlenka were under complete Ukraine control, and nobody probably 2 days ago even was thinking about that the Russians are able to do the things that they managed to do 2 days after. On the 26th of October, we have first reports about the Russian breakthrough, of course. We have first reports that the Russians reached the outskirts of the village of Shakhtarska. We didn't receive anything about Novoukrainka, and we got report that the Russians captured the stronghold to the south of Bogoyavlenka. And today, by the end of the 27th of October, the picture was changed once again completely, and we see that most of the settlements either were already captured by the Russians or about to be captured. Now let's move to the fourth direction, and we are talking about the area between the village of Katerinovka and Yelizavetovka, because there are very heavy clashes in this area as well. And today the Russian sources also published the video with the Russian flag. This is exactly an example when I was trying to tell you about the Russian flag but without soldiers. In this video we can see a Russian soldier who raised the Russian flag from a window. He's not on the roof, he is trying to do this from a very safe position, and this video most likely confirm that either the Russian soldier doesn't feel himself as safe in the southern part of Katerinovka, or the Russians don't have a strong control over the territory. Anyway, this is a proof. Of course, this is the proof. This is not the proof that the Russians control the entire Katerinovka, but this is the proof that the Russians established control over the farms. At least based on this video, we have colored this territory. Furthermore, we have additional video from Ukrainian sources that's event that took place to the southeast of Yelizavetovka, and in this video we can see the process how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian convoy that was heading exactly towards the village of Yelizavetovka. Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the Russians, lots of destroyed vehicles, lots of FPV drone attacks, lots of things, and based on these two videos we have adjusted the map in the vicinity of Ekaterinivka and Yelizavetovka. So this is the situation on the evening on the 26th of October, and now we see that the Russians are about to enter the village of Yelizavetovka from the southeast. We are talking about this complex, let's say, network of barracks and farms. Obviously, the Russians will advance in this direction as well, and once again, everything, one can say that the South Donetsk front line has collapsed completely. Ukrainians probably will not be able to hold their lines, and some sources began talking that Ukrainians start talking and start spreading the rumors and talks that most likely they would be forced to fall back from Kurakhove before 2025. And if it happens, I'm not even sure where exactly the Ukrainians are planning to stop the Russians then. Now let's move further. And let's talk about Kurakhove itself, because we have also additional changes on the ground. The Russians managed to maintain the line of combat contact and to reach the first and the last defense belt of Kurakhove itself from the east. There are two company strongholds, as you can see, which can be, let's say, even seen from the satellite. We can see dense network of the fortifications, and the Russians began assault operation on these positions. At least we have video of how the Russians were bombing these territories, these dense network of the fortifications with the tall flamethrower systems. And when the Russians bomb anything with tall flamethrower systems, that means that this is the first stage before the ground operation. So I believe that this upcoming night they're going to be first attempt from the Russian side to take under control these strongholds, and if these strongholds fall, then I believe that's a few more days, several days, and the Kurakhove itself, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. Now let's talk about Gornyak and the Kurakhove agglomeration. The village of Gornyak was captured yesterday according to geolocations and updates that we received on the 26th of October. And today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the Group of Forces Center managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Izmailovka. So there are still lots of cleanup operation in Gornyak. There are still lots of job to do, but the first reports appeared that the Russians began assault operation in Kurakhove itself. So the next step for the Ukrainians is this landfill and these facilities. This is the next step where Ukrainians will try to slow down the Russians, but not to slow down them, not to allow them to move further. This is going to be the process to slow down the Russians with the purpose to regroup, to accumulate as many as possible forces, those to manage to survive from these cauldrons and then move back, and then to move further in the western directions towards the village of Berestki. So probably during the next week this entire territory would be captured by the Russians, and then the battle for Kurakhove from the north is going to start. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the city of Selydove. As you can see, let's say 50% of the settlement is already colored in Russian favor. 45% of the settlement is already colored in contested area, which means that there are lots of mappers like neutral, like pro-Ukrainian or pro-Russian mappers that already have reported that the settlement was captured completely, but without any videos or geolocations. And we have just 5% in the most northwestern part of the settlement that still remains under Ukraine control. Now let's discuss in details, and the most important video is coming from the territory of the village by the name of Vishnova. You know, we've been keeping the territory along the railways for around 10 days in contested area. For example, the first report that the Russians managed to take under control the village of Vishnova took place, let's try to find the date, For example, on the 13th of October, we start receiving updates about the changes on the ground. Yes, the first report that the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the village of Vishnyovo took place on the 15th of October. So 12 days ago, we got the first report that the Russians at least crossed the road between Selydove and Kurakhove itself, and on the 17th of October, we started receiving reports that the Russians managed to move even further. So around 10 days ago, yes, 10 days ago, we got report from pro-Russian sources that the Russians managed to cut the road between Vishnyovo itself and Selydove. And since that moment, we've been keeping this territory as contested area. And telling the truth, until today, I had some doubts whether the Russians managed to answer the village of Vishnyovo itself, because it was too successful. That was too much successful operation, you know. So to take under control the village of Vishnyovo was too much successfully for the Russians, because sometimes it was unbelievable. So that's why this is also another reason why we've been holding this territory as contested area. And today, on the 27th of October, when we start receiving reports about the fall of Selydove, we got two geolocations exactly from the territory of the village of Vishnyovo. And as you can see, we have colored Vishnyovo in Russian favor even faster and earlier than the entire Selydove, of course based on the videos that we received. For example, in this video that was published by the pro-Ukrainian sources, we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians along the railways, and this video is 100% proof that this territory was captured by the Russians. And during the day on the 27th of October, first we have colored everything until this line. So this is the border between Vishnyovo and the railways. And later, also today on the 27th of October, we got another video from the village itself, and in this video we can see Russian flag. And this is once again a case when we see the flag but we don't see the Russians, which means that yes, indeed the territory most likely was captured by the Russians, but the Russians still don't have strong control over this territory. So we have adjusted the map in Russian favor, as we discussed even earlier than the entire Selydove. As for Selydove itself, during the day we received a significant number of videos of how the Russian convoys with a significant number of troopers with a significant number of electronic warfare equipment attached on the vehicles were moving through the central part of Selydove. And for example, in this video we can see the Russian soldier who was commenting that we are moving along the main Centralna street in Selydove. As you can see, this is the city of Selydove, we are here. The Russians managed to break through, the Ukrainians left the territory, and many other things was stated by him. And based on this video, we haven't made any adjustments because the Russians were moving already, but through the territory that was already captured, colored before. Anyway, this video confirms strong control with a significant number of infantry, and the Russians are not afraid of any FPV drone or snipers or sabotage and reconnaissance group. As for the Ukrainians, we have just one video. This is it. This video was published early in the morning of the 27th of October, and in this video we can see a group of Ukrainian forces, soldiers, probably one of the last groups that managed to escape the encirclement, escape the cauldron, and to escape the agony of Selydove. In this video we can see just 5-6 Ukrainian soldiers that were running and moving as fast as possible from the settlement in the direction of Vishnyovo and trying to attack in different directions, because as I understand, they realized and they knew that the Russians already around them, and basically I don't know what was they counting on that, but they managed. These Ukrainian soldiers managed to break through the encirclement and to escape the being caught in cauldron. Anyway, we are waiting for additional updates. Most likely during this upcoming night we're going to receive another parade of flags, of Russian flags everywhere in Selydove, and probably during the next 12 hours we will color most of Selydove in Russian favor and the rest would be in contested zone. Now let's move further. We have there are still clashes, very heavy clashes for the coal mine Novoukrainka III. The Russians, after they captured the mine itself, the Russians began moving further in the northern direction. And in this video we can see the significant number of FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles that were abandoned along this dense network of the fortifications. You see that there are two company strongholds, and the Russians are begin clearing this territory before the ground operation. So maybe during the next few days the Russians will secure this territory, and then nothing will be between the Russians and the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Also, we have additional changes on the ground in the vicinity of Novoukrainka. The village of Novoukrainka was colored in Russian favor by many mappers probably 2 months ago. But still, we haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm Russian control over the settlement, and we and the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation haven't reported about this neither. So today we got the first videos that confirm Russian progress, and most likely during the next few days the Russians will confirm complete control over this small settlement, and they will establish the defense belt and line of combat contact along these water reservoirs, Казенный Торец River, and this is another part of Казенный Торец River. Now let's move further. Chasiv Yar, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just several FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian positions in Zabalka district, and another part of Zabalka district was restored in Ukrainian favor. So this territory used to be under the Russians, and now this once again under Ukrainian control. Now let's move further. As for the city of Chasiv Yar, just regular activity. The Russians were bombing and attacking the settlement with a significant number of aviation, artillery, and FABs. The Russians continue their preparation, most likely after the fall of Selydove, Kurakhove, and all these towns and villages and settlements. The Russians obviously gonna have to have some regrouping before moving further, and I believe that during this regrouping they will redeploy some artillery force, FPV drones in the direction of Chasiv Yar, and then they will resume their attempts, their offensive operation with the new pressure and new force. As for the Siversk, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything. As for the south in Kupiansk, we have additional changes on the ground in the northern part of the village Pershatravneva. The Ukrainians a few weeks ago renamed the settlement of Pershatravneva in the name of Steppe, and in this video we can see how the Russians were raising the flag on the highest construction with drone. This video confirms Russian control with the south-northern part, but this video also confirms that the Russians still don't have strong control over the territory. So most likely during the next few days they will finish the cleanup operation, then they will color the entire village in Russian favor. We continue receiving updates of Russian improvements of their positions along the river of Oskol. The Russians managed to answer the southern part of Kolesnikovka, and this information was confirmed by Ukrainians. In this video we can see several FPV drone attacks on the edge Russian positions, and based on this video we have colored the southern part of Kolesnikovka in Russian favor. So these are the changes on the ground for the previous 24 hours. So that was the control on the end of the 26th of October. This is the Russian control by the end of the 27th of October. The same story in the vicinity of the bridge to Sinkova. The Ukrainians published the video of the 77th Air Mobile Brigade of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians along this forest, along this road. Based on this video, we have adjusted this part also in Russian favor. Also, we got the video from Sinkova. In this video, very important video, we can see how the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian temporary deployment point with the use of FAB. Some military experts are saying that there are very high chances that the Russians are not going to in the southern or in the northern direction. The Russians are going to attack in the direction of Sinkova. But another value of this video is to understand the exact and the real situation along the river of Oskol. And as you can see in this part, the situation is not so good. We are talking about the river itself and the water surface, so it's not going to be not very difficult, not very easy for the Russians if they decide to cross the river of Oskol in this part. Now let's move further. As for the Kursk direction, we have the most important updates are coming from the Kurakhove region, and in this video we can see that it was published by the Ukrainians how the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the Russian forces. This is the second attempt, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. Officially, this is the second attempt from the Ukrainian side to break through the border with the Russians and to move in the direction of Kurakhove. But when talking about the previous attempts, Ukrainians managed to even answer the village of Veselaya and maybe to capture the village of Bukhovka. But as for this second attempt, the Ukrainians haven't managed even to cross the border. The vehicles and personal carriers, everything, Ukrainian forces were destroyed exactly along the border. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map completely in Russian favor and we restored the border control by the Russians. So this is the current situation in this area. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.